Okay, welcome everybody who is just coming every second somebody. We are waiting for more people now because there will be more than 200 people attending the workshop. So please hold on for 1 or 2 minutes since we are here and then we will start. Okay, people are still coming here, but I think it's a good time to start, and who comes later, it's the problem of the person, not our problem. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar about digital marketing. And I would like to thank to King Baudouin Foundation United States that we were able to do it together, because there was a high interest from, in fact, all over the world in attending this workshop. And I would like also to thank our dear trainers and experts that they were able to join us. Regarding the digital marketing, the result of European Fundraising Association research last year was that COVID really increased use of digital channels for nonprofit in fundraising. About 67% of organizations reported that they were in fact pushed to use more digital channels, and they also had to cancel some fundraising events face-to-face, some activities they were doing before the COVID and problems. So digital channels definitely became one of the major tools of communication, not only with donors. And for the future, it looks like that it will not go back to face that much as we would expect before the pandemic, but that the digital channels will stay as a most important, maybe most important, but as a very important channel for communication. So I hope you will find some answers for your questions today, and then it will help to develop your digital literacy, which we have, all of us have to learn very quickly, very fast during the last year or two. My name is Jana Ledvinova. I am from the Czech Fundraising Center. I work there as founder, as director, and the Czech Fundraising Center operates in the Czech Republic and mostly in Eastern and Central European countries, supporting the freedom of nonprofit organizations by diversifying the resources and also by attracting private donors to become more interested in the civil sector development. And thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Jana, for those introductory words, and thank you so much for your partnership on this webinar today. Please allow me a brief word of welcome. My name is Elena Fortunatos. I'm the Deputy Director of the King Baudouin Foundation, United States. It's great to be here, and thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time today. There are some familiar names in the attendee list, but for those who aren't familiar with KBFUS, please allow me a brief word. KBFUS facilitates thoughtful, effective giving to Europe and Africa and beyond. We enable U.S. donors to support their favorite causes overseas. We also provide European and African nonprofits with cost-effective solutions to raise funds in the United States through a tool we call an American Friends Fund. We have over 500 American Friends Funds, including with institutions like the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands, the National Library of France, and the National Museum in Warsaw, among others. These funds save nonprofits the trouble and expense of setting up their own 501c3 public charity. KBFUS handles all back office administration, including tax receipts and donor support. In addition to these services, we sponsor educational opportunities like this one, and will resume our spring study visit when circumstances allow. We hope we can welcome you to our future programs online and in person. If you're interested in learning more about our services, please do reach out to me directly. My contact information will be made available following the webinar. Now, a couple housekeeping notes. Everybody is in listen-only mode. The session is being recorded and will be made available after. And we will open to questions at the end of the discussion, but you can use the Q&A feature to submit questions throughout. That's not the same as the chat. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see Q&A. Now, please allow me to introduce our excellent speakers today. First, I'll introduce Vijay Malavia. Vijay is the Director of Digital Marketing at VeraData Decision Labs. He began with search marketing in the for-profit space at Imagine That, a digital lifestyle marketing agency best known for its cutting-edge advertising solutions. While there, Vijay worked with a number of blue-chip clients, including McDonald's, Toyota, and Lexus. Since then, he has held numerous positions to expand his reach into display advertising and email marketing, expanding into the nonprofit world with clients like Human Rights Watch, the National Urban League, and the Assistance Fund, one of Forbes' top 100 charities in the U.S. Vijay received his Bachelor of Science degree in Marketing and Economics from Northwestern University, where he was a member of the Dean's List, as well as the Alpha Sigma Lambda Honor Society inductee. He is a certified Google AdWords professional with a strong interest in emerging media. Thank you so much, Vijay, for joining us today. And I'll introduce our second speaker, Carla San Vicente Cunha. Carla is the Senior Account Director of Digital Marketing at Faircom New York. She works across many nonprofit clients, including Human Rights Watch, and provides personalized approaches to digital marketing, implementation, and strategy. She focuses on building integrated digital presence through social media, web, email, as well as collaborating with direct mail marketing programs leaders for a cohesive fundraising strategy. She holds a master's degree in business administration and a bachelor's degree in sociology. She's a volunteer communications coordinator for the American Sociological Association's Consumer and Consumption section. Now, thank you, Carla, so much for joining us. Thank you, Vijay. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So welcome, everyone. As you know, I'm Carla and Vijay is here. So I'll share my screen shortly so we can begin the presentation. Okay, so today's theme is about optimizing your digital fundraising program. So this will be more of a conversation between two experts, so you can listen in and how we think strategically about how we approach our digital programs for our clients and our experience behind the scenes. So I'll get started. Yeah, so that's us, and we'll jump into trends with Vijay.
Great, thank you, Carla. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present these overarching global trends. I think as we dive into a lot of the similarities and the differences, we'll attempt to really understand, based on what we saw in terms of changes over the past year in environment, in climate, in attitudes, and namely in behavior, which of those trends are we seeing sort of fade away? Which of them are we seeing sort of persevere and stick around? And which of those do we see continue to grow? And that's a little bit about what we'll talk about here on this first slide in terms of digital adoption. As mentioned earlier, digital adoption was significantly accelerated globally and in Europe during the pandemic. We saw a jump from 81% to 95% as a result of COVID. And it was something that a growth that was predicted to occur over a number of years took place in 2020 and in 2021. And when we really break it down, the CEE countries grew almost twice as fast in previous months, but really there are things that are hidden in the averages. So the growth wasn't necessarily equal across all countries. It was really determined and influenced by the rate of digital adoption prior to the pandemic and the level and the severities of the lockdown measures in each country. So for example, countries such as Finland demonstrated a smaller rate of growth versus countries such as Germany, which saw significant growth in digital adoption. And in terms of what people were doing, they were really consuming news content and being very active in accelerating their activity on social media. Messaging platforms also saw a huge uptick, and mobile really became the dominant device. We also saw grocery as the category that spiked the highest for delivery services. And when we start to think about the number of people who started to come online and use services, it certainly uncovers opportunities from a nonprofit fundraising perspective. When you think about the scale, 12 million new users of online services appeared in CEE. And while this was driven predominantly by a younger population, the strongest growth, the largest growth, was actually observed among consumers aged over 65. So, you know, this starts to, again, uncover opportunities, as we know that people who are starting to take steps and in using online services and making their first transactions in categories such as grocery have a higher likelihood of potentially making donations online. I think we can jump to the next slide. When we take a step back and we look at that shift in behavior, we also have to be cognizant of the shift in the landscape and in the digital environment. And there have been some major shifts that we've seen unfolding over the years and really starting to accelerate. One of those is data privacy and privacy measures being driven by you know, the needs of consumers. And platforms are really starting to change the way that they release their products. They're enacting measures to improve data privacy because users are opting out of data collection. We saw that with Apple most recently, releasing the 14.5 iOS update and the app transparency tracking. We have a screenshot of that here, where whenever you're opening an app on your mobile phone, there's a prompt that's asking you if you want to share data with that app and allow the app to collect your data and use it to serve personalized ads. And largely, people are opting out in mass, in US to the tune of above 95%. That really places a premium on collecting first-party data in the form of email addresses and phone numbers to enable those relationships and that one-to-one communication. We've also seen the rise of new mobile platforms. The one that we see get the most attention right now is TikTok. It's growing at an exponential rate. It just recently surpassed YouTube in terms of average time spent per user in this month, and its growth has outstripped every app other than like any Facebook-owned apps, and it's mainly attracting a younger audience, but it's an audience that appears to be active, and TikTok is attempting to empower this audience by providing them donation tools, very similar to what we've seen on Instagram in the form of donation stickers to help facilitate fundraising. And we've seen text donations were also at their highest in 2020. And consumers and donors are showing that they're open to receiving these messages. We've seen open rates exceed email open rates, and it appears to have a tremendous amount of momentum with a lot of nonprofits piloting successful text-to-give programs. The pandemic also showed us that there was a huge rise in gaming. It started to break some of the sort of myths around it being something that you just do alone, isolated. Gaming really brought people together in meaningful ways across different age groups. And Twitch saw phenomenal revenue, just in terms of, phenomenal engagement in terms of viewership, but they were also able to help do good with that engagement, generating over $83 million in peer-to-peer donation revenue in the past year. And then one of the other trends, and this is going to vary a lot by country, depending on where you are, connected TV is growing, but it's still fragmented. Streaming services such as Netflix are poised for growth, especially in newer markets, and also in established markets. All of these trends help uncover opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit about the platforms and the tools next.
Yes, so most of you probably use Facebook and Instagram for your advertising on the social media side, and that's really important, of course, given the age ranges. Another two channels on here, obviously Twitter and LinkedIn, they're kind of still like being tested into in terms of fundraising, but they always have been there. It's a matter of how to use it properly. So on the Twitter side, of course, it's not just limited to static imagery and text. You can also have like live stream videos and things to really engage your supporters on there, not just for engagement purposes, but also for fundraising purposes to really have everyone jump on. In terms of LinkedIn, this is something we're still kind of diving into with most of our clients, but it is a really resourceful place to advertise for fundraising, to really reach those corporate foundation decision makers and those who have graduate degrees as well, who you want to pull in where they're most active on, and LinkedIn is one of those. So what they have in common, as you might notice, is that they, all require something that will capture the attention of the audience. So having more visual, like videos or quizzes, and even memes, and even using emojis in your text while advertising is really important to really grab attention, especially during high traffic times that are coming up for end of year fundraising. You want to make sure that you're always top of mind, and even behind the scenes investing heavily on the advertising side. And you might notice these are just social media platforms, but I'll let Vijay talk more towards YouTube, which is something people don't really look at as the most initiative for fundraising.
Yeah, and it isn't necessarily what we would label as a social platform, but we know that YouTube has tremendous reach globally, and we know that people are consuming an increasing amount of video on YouTube. YouTube has made a really large investment in both incentivizing creators and also creating their own unique content. It's again, something that YouTube has done is really tried to evolve their advertising offering to help advertisers accomplish their goals by removing friction. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of that. One of the biggest challenges in terms of YouTube was just direct response. Branding advertisers were able to generate reach and find their audiences and meet frequency goals and boost recall with success, but direct response advertisers had trouble selling products or driving donations or generating leads. And so YouTube created two relatively new products, one of them called a bumper ad, which enables you to serve a small banner alongside your video ad creative to help boost response rate and click-throughs to the website. Another is they recently released something called lead gen extensions, which are essentially little automated forms that can appear within your ad unit that can be auto-populated if someone is logged into their Google account. removing the friction from the lead generation process and enabling advertisers and nonprofit organizations to collect information such as email address and phone numbers.
So with all of this in mind, thinking about how to engage your supporters with a digital toolbox. So social media is a big part of it, as we went over, and also considering other platforms like YouTube to really expand your reach. But there's a few areas also that we were wanting to discuss that are really important and relevant to the discussion. So I'll let Vijay start on privacy laws.
Certainly. It really, privacy has really placed a premium on permission-based advertising and really focusing on the ways that you can collect information and provide utility to the audience to generate that value exchange. And we've seen a lot of nonprofit organizations use different mechanisms for lead magnets, including different things like reports and white papers and research studies. Newsletters, of course, are very common as well. But really thinking about the way that you can empower choice and allow for people to provide their information in the context and the setting that they feel most comfortable is very, very important across the digital channels. So again, being able to provide those lead sort of acquisition opportunities, both across your social media profiles and also within the website in creative ways, including leveraging things that such as like lightbox pop-ups on specific pages for specific audiences, and really thinking about the way that you can customize the things that you're saying based on what you know about the user. Again, looking at their behavior in terms of how that person came to the website, and then understanding what content they consumed or digested on the website can provide insight into what to say to them next, and it can significantly improve both A, just their experience at large, and B, your ability to achieve your lead and your fundraising objectives. And that's really what we're thinking about when we talk about the personalized experience, and being very cognizant of the fact that when you design these experiences, more often than not, and this trend will accelerate, it won't go the other way, people are going to be consuming that on smaller, relatively small screens, on handheld mobile devices. And so it really begs the question of how do you orchestrate and how do you operationalize something like that? And there are a number of tools, new and enhanced tools, that help navigate things like privacy and data collection and ensuring that you have an orchestrated and a consistent sort of presence across the various digital touch points that people are engaging with in their respective journeys. And some of those tools you're familiar with, some of them may be new to you, but established CRMs like Salesforce are continuing to enhance their capabilities for nonprofits. Google has a host of different paid but also free tools that they offer. One of them being Google Optimize, that can help us really test and learn about our audiences so that we can make better decisions in the future. And another example is WhatsApp for an SMS.
And to add to what Vijay just mentioned about SMS, I have some examples here of how Doctors Without Borders US has been communicating to audiences here via text message when something comes up, not just emergency campaigns, which 2 of them are, but also when they're just trying to generally push for more supporters. So it's a really important tool to really consider, in addition to what Vijay mentioned to the others. But WhatsApp and text messaging in general is a big area where nonprofits really need to dive more into. And so it's really, really important to consider that. And so moving forward, so the one thing, if you want all these tools to work properly, is also having an optimized donation page in place. And I'm actually going to show you the live page since it'll be easier to walk through. So Human Rights Watch has tested their donation page for months and months and months, trying to see what their audience best responds to. And so what they really found is having this really compelling image on their general donation page, and also having the steps to really walk through the process so people know how much they have to walk through before they make that final transaction. And so one of the important things that were discussed is like, what would be the goal of the general donation page? And so the answer was, it depends on the time of year and what we're promoting. And so in this case, they wanted to focus on monthly giving on their general donation page for a limited time when we're pushing monthly, an evergreen ads or an email, to have it kind of align with that, since this is a stream of revenue in the United States that compromises of about 20% of online revenue. So monthly giving is a big area of where nonprofits should be looking into, not just the US, but across the board. It's a really powerful program that does sustain your program in long term. In the short term, it might look really small when you run a campaign, but in the long term, you'll see the impact once you start spreading out within like a few years, and they're the most reliable source of online revenue. And so that was something that they considered. They said, okay, like let's focus on that. And also, what amounts should we use? And so it was more informed by the data from their audience, who currently was giving in monthly, and currently who would be responding most to what amount. So they determined to start with $15 as their lowest ask, and their highest at $75. Since in general, their average is around $35, but they also wanted to be cognizant of prospects. So they lowered it slightly to make sure they capture a wider net of people who would give monthly. And so this is kind of how they kind of walk through it. They also tested what type of language to include, keeping it as brief as possible, also informing people of their choices. And as you scroll down to the page, you also have other ways to give. A really important thing to consider for websites, for nonprofits, is having that donate button at the top of your website, and also making sure it leads to a page like the donation page like this, instead of directly to this page where it says other ways to give. But you can also have these little boxes on your donation page that link to these other ways that people should be supporting you. And it's been working really well thus far for Human Rights Watch.
Yeah, Carla, I think this is just an excellent example of how one of those tools, and in this case, it was Google Optimize, could help facilitate a very valuable learning in terms of which experience is going to generate the most value during the business as usual times, versus what type of experience should we shift to when we have large peaks in interest and intent. Any kind of milestone days, such as Giving Tuesday or things like end of calendar year. And they were able to take a data-driven approach because, to your point, they established goals for those different times, and they were able to then start to measure their progress and understand how the different experiences impacted their ability to meet those KPIs. On the paid media side, the KPI that we monitored was the value per click that we would be able to generate from each of those experiences. And to your exact point, it required us to acknowledge the trade-off between future fundraising donation revenue and what could be generated immediately in the short term. We can shift over now to the competitor ad tracking. I think this is another tool that can be incredibly valuable, and there are a number of different paid and free mechanisms to gain intelligence on what the competitive set or similar organizations are doing. Are they active in this, on these platforms or in this space? If so, what are they saying and what are they doing? And is there anything that we can learn? And this example here is of Facebook's ad library. If you go to any Facebook page, under page transparency, you will see a link to the ad library. And there you're able to see any and all ads that are connected to that Facebook page, along with information on how much there was spent over the sort of the lifetime, as well as in the past 7 days. You're able to also understand who those ads are being served to in terms of demographics, what locations those ads were being targeted to. And so you can start to really gain, again, a lot of intelligence in terms of what types of like segmentation strategies, and what types of like calls to action, and how the organizations are speaking differently to different audiences, as well as being able to understand visually what type of creative they're serving, and calls to action. So it's a very valuable tool. Another one that I think is worthy of mention, and there are many tools, and this one offers both a free and a paid version, and I know it's been incredibly useful for US research. My European research on it is a limited, but there are also similar tools. This one is called Spark Toro, and it essentially starts to help us understand, based on people who visit a given website or follow a given Twitter handle, what types of interests they have, what types of podcasts they listen to, what type of news publications they read, who they follow on social media, the types of words they use in their bios, in their content that they publish, etc. And it really helps us think strategically about content strategy. And it, again, also helps us uncover interests, which is a very valuable thing in the future for ad targeting, as the platforms start to collect less data, and as they're able to make less, as their lookalike modeling capabilities start to decrease, it's going to be more important that we know what interests to plug into each of these ad platforms in an effort to target the audiences that we want to put our ads in front of.
Right, and to Vijay's point, it also impacts how to approach lead generation. And so having like all your research behind the scenes and in terms of targeting interest is going to be really important, where the limitation on the lookalike audience will become an issue moving forward. But, one of the things to also consider is on the creative side, how are you going to create less friction for those who you're trying to collect their email or their phone number, because this will be the currency, digital currency of the future. And even currently. So it's considering how you can really reach these supporters. What can you offer to them in order to gain the information that you used to have easy access to? And so a lot of testing has been done with different types of nonprofits. And so when they offer like a free download of an impact report or a newsletter sign up, those worked really well. In addition to having like a creative type of fill in with quizzes, like knowledge quizzes, where people can submit their email towards the end to know like the result, and also to learn more about the issue that was covered in the quiz. And of course, what a more important thing is to make sure that the ad that's, very direct. You always want to make sure that people understand right away in a few seconds what they're reading and capture their interests, or else they will just scroll through and see another ad, because as the times are getting more and more crowded in terms of year end, you want to make sure that you're always top of mind and really enhancing and optimizing those texts and imagery that would work best for your organization. And another important thing too is like once you have their information, you need to make sure that you follow up right away. If you don't follow up within 24 hours with the welcome message or an opt-in message, that's going to decrease your likelihood of keeping these people on file. So it's really important to have that top of mind while planning a lead generation campaign. So these are just examples of just, essential campaigns, but, Giving Tuesday and end of year are really important since they capture a large portion of online revenue, about 40% of it. But we also don't want to stray away from the evergreen campaigns like monthly giving and cultivations, rapid response, and also advertising throughout the year to really build upon what, year-end fundraising does. So it's really important to have a plan from the whole entire, even starting with January on, really trying to focus on key points like special awareness days that focus around what your organization is doing, and also cultivating audiences during big campaigns, especially Giving Tuesday and end of year. Cultivations do help boost response in between larger campaigns. And also having thank you emails, even throughout the emails, like thank you all for supporting me so far. Here are other ways that you can support us, and also include other ways to give. I know that's something a lot of organizations are like, well, when can I really promote that other than a cultivation? And we've historically have been doing it as like a PS and end of year emails or Giving Tuesday emails on how they can give different ways, like through like Plain Giving, or in the US, the donor advised funds, where donors have like a specialized fund where they can designate to organizations. So keeping all those things top of mind is really important in the planning process on the digital side.
Yeah, we've really seen incredible performance on those milestone days, not only in terms of being able to acquire new donors, but really from like CRM audiences and from the existing donors. The performance of ads targeting those CRM audiences and the performance of email is really, really spectacular. And it just, again, reinforces what you were mentioning there earlier, Carla, around the value of having those like evergreen campaigns, and the value of acquiring those email addresses and those phone numbers, which really translate to the digital currency of the future. I think we can talk a little bit about the end of year, since that is probably of all of those campaigns listed, the one that we see a really significant amount of revenue generated on.
Exactly. And so this kind of summarizes what the best practices are. And I'm sure most of you have been doing this, having a fundraising goal and having a matching gift is really key, but also thinking about other creative ways, like match extensions are really big in the US, especially to capture someone's attention, that they still can participate in, for example, a Giving Tuesday match that, this year's on November 30th. So like on December 1st, having that follow-up message for those who didn't participate will give them more of an incentive, like, oh, I can still participate, it's not too late. And that does lift response rate for campaigns that we've seen. And I also mentioned about the other ways to give. So yes, there is creative ways to include that in your end of year appeals, not just as a cultivation, but also as like a PS or end of like the email messaging, trying to cultivate and let donors know that they have other options. So yeah, the biggest part too is personalizing your messages. You always want to make sure you have pop-ups on the website promoting what your campaign is, uncovering. And so another creative thing here too is that we usually use two types of light boxes for end of year. One that's pretty much general, saying support us on Giving Tuesday, but when it's closer to the deadline, we'll have a light box that has more urgent language saying you have only 2 days left to support us. We also include those type of messaging on those pop-ups on the website. And we also try to test ask strings, try to make them a little bit higher than normal peak times, because this isn't the opportunity to really try to gain that higher gift and even upgrade supporters. And obviously having an optimized donation page, as we discussed, having all the testing in, and then making sure you're putting that into practice here, and customizing it to the campaign as its own tracked page.
Great, I'll walk us through another sort of essential, when we talked about these essential campaigns, I think an essential tool in the toolbox is being able to take advantage of Google's grant offering. Google offers nonprofit organizations, eligible nonprofit organizations, a grant of up to $10,000 a month, which enables those nonprofits to be able to serve sponsored ads on the Google search engine results page when people are doing searches on google.com across different devices. And those ads can be targeted based on the region that the nonprofit serves. And again, those funds can be used to bid on keywords that are related to the mission and the cause, the programs and the events that are associated with the nonprofit organization. It's a fantastic way to help generate awareness when people are, again, searching for those types of keywords that may not be aware of your organization. It's a great way to drive engagement. We've seen several of our clients leverage the Google Grant program to drive a significant number of leads, whether that's through newsletter or petition signups. And we've also seen a lot of clients leverage this successfully for fundraising, especially those clients that do have some brand awareness that translates into search interest in market. And for some of those clients, when we see actually a significant amount of brand search interest, we also recommend complementing the Google Grant with Google paid ads. The difference being that in the former, with the Google Grant, Google is granting those dollars. In the latter, the advertiser is paying for the clicks on those ads that appear on the search engine results page. But when we go through that paid route, Google provides, of course, a special preference or priority to those ads, and they have a higher likelihood of serving relative to the Google Grant ads. With that said, we're able to actually leverage a number of different extensions to enable people to directly call or find directions or get information on events or fill out leads. It is something that is starting to evolve less. It really started out as a discipline that was based on keywords. It's really starting to evolve into an audience targeted discipline where on the paid side, we can target specific audiences, for example, people who visited your website or people who are interested in green lifestyle or people who are in your CRM. And we can serve them specific ads and send them to specific pages and bid on them based on sort of their perceived future value. It's really a little different than social because it's targeting the hand raisers. These are the people who are actually searching. Great.
Absolutely. Given the time, I want to focus on automations are important, but I also want to kind of tie into what really is more relevant at the moment in terms of what we just did with Human Rights Watch and tie in some of the best practices that we mentioned here. So we actually ran an emergency campaign around Afghanistan a few weeks ago, and within 2 weeks we were managed to raise over $72,000. It's still running, but more with the match component now. But it's just a really good example of kind of trying to keep with what's going on in the news that's relevant also to the organization, and how we used all our digital tools to really push forward a really successful campaign that was turned around in less than 24 hours to start. So we thought about messaging, of course, and using what Human Rights Watch was already putting out there to craft a fundraising message for email, for ads, and also thinking about the website in terms of having a personalized landing page that ties in with the campaign, and the light box that will focus on the urgency of support. And so this is a really great example of using all the tools that we had of hand at a really fast pace to really keep up and stay relevant with the times as well. So this was something that we were pretty proud of going into, and we're still seeing some success from it now. So. Another important aspect is peer-to-peer, and I'll touch upon this briefly. So one of the big things that some of our clients face is having some sort of fundraiser around one of their big programs, especially for Learning Ally. It was around helping the students that they support. And so they have this campaign called Building Books. And so essentially we helped on the back end in terms of like crafting the messaging, the creative, and they have this like little microsite on their page that helps people to know what step they take in helping them fundraise and reach their goal, which was $100,000 within 3 months. And they did exceed that. So that was really very good. And also having other things in place. So having a toolkit for social media, having an email plan dedicated to reaching out to donors and volunteers who would most likely start their own fundraisers through the website, which was integrated with Classy. So they use those platforms to really start their peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. So it was a very successful campaign. And I think another tool to just quickly touch on is Facebook peer-to-peer. This is a really important tool, and it's growing more and more to really consider promoting via an email cultivation for those whose birthdays that you have on file. And so this is something that we do with most of our clients that have that information and really push it each month. And some have even seen growth of over like 50% since they started. And it's something to really consider doing, and especially having a designated landing page to explain to those how they can fundraise for you, and one of which should include the Facebook peer-to-peer feature. And these are just examples of what we put together. The little GIFs on the side are actually part of the advertising component. And this is something that's really important as well for on the digital side, to really have some animations, videos, anything that can really capture the attention of your audience. And yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are going to jump right into the Q&A because I know we have some questions. So first up, about the donate page and the optimization, were you referring to Google optimization as the tool, or was there another tool you suggested?
We were referencing Google's tool for website testing, which is has a free and a paid version. The free version is called Google Optimize. The paid version is called Optimize 360 and is part of the Google marketing platform. they the client that we were referencing was leveraging the free version of Google Optimize, and what they were able to do using that tool was modify a number of different elements of the website, including things like the default ask, whether it was monthly or one time, the array, the headline, the copy, and the image, the hero image.
Thank you. And just one quick follow-up, and then I'll turn it over to Jana for the next question. You mentioned Spark Tomorrow as an audience mining service, but one of our participants couldn't find this. Could you explain this tool again, please?
Of course, and apologies. It's actually spelled Spark, Toro, Spark, S-P-A-R-K, Toro, T-O-R-O. It's all one word. And it's a tool created by one of the sort of pioneers and leaders in the SEO industry.
Okay. Well, I'm checking for your questions here now, going through them. And I think it was one interesting question in the chat, which was mentioning gift letters or strings, as you mentioned. What would you recommend? You mentioned 10, 25, 50, but I know there are many other options. What by your opinion is the best way how to put together the strings or gift letters?
Yeah, so what we do historically is look at the averages online for our clients. So we build it off of the average gift there on the lower end. So depends on the audiences. So we like to break them up into different groups. So there's donors that go from like $1 to 100. So we look at what would be customized for their landing page, and then also looking at the mid-level donors. For example, if they're like $1,000 gift, so we start with their average gift as the lowest. And then we have suggestions on like building it up so they are more enticed to pick what is a little bit higher. And so we highlight that on the landing page. So the $1,000 donor will see that the lower end would be what they just gave. And also the upgraded version would be like 1,500 or 2,000. And so we would highlight that 2,000 on the landing page, make it a pre-selected option. So once they look at it, they're enticed to say, oh, okay, I can give, a little bit more. And that's kind of how we've been testing across the board for our clients. We really have to look at what has been working from the data, helping the data inform the ask string tests. And we've seen like a higher response, of course, during end of year where people are feeling more generous. So we're really trying to push for more of that like upgrade during that time. And it also works with monthly giving, where you see where does your monthly giving average gift fall? Okay, let's use that as a starting point. And if it's 25 or 35, we can use that to help upgrade the current monthly donors. And also looking at the lower end to see what can be used for prospects on the monthly donor side or on the one-time donation side. So we use a lot of data to inform those decisions.
Perfect, thank you.
We have another question that I know always comes up in these sessions when we hear from American experts like yourselves. Fundraising and optimization are very culturally specific. So can you speak to how you can build a testing strategy that will help our participants find the best way to market in their specific context?
Yeah, so what we do when we plan for the year for fundraising is having a plan set up. So depending on what type of campaigns that we're doing, we like to look at what would be most efficient in terms of testing. Of course, we don't want to test in a big series all the time. We want to make sure that we have campaigns or before Giving Tuesday, for example, to test like the call to action buttons or the ask strings. Like we do a lot of heavy testing before year end, but sometimes we do find doing maybe a small test on the ask string during Giving Tuesday or end of year, for example, still helps inform and also gain some upgrades that we wouldn't have gotten if we only tested it before. So it really depends on the capability that you have and the people on board that will help you implement such testing, because it is time consuming. And so we like to plan it out before we go into it, at least a few months out before running with certain tests. So we like to make sure that it works with the schedule that we have in place.
Okay, thank you, Carla. There's another question here. When we do lead generation, what is the best way to welcome individuals into our audience and to turn them into donors?
That's a great question. So that was part of the automation section that we couldn't go over due to time, but an important thing here is when someone signs up, even through like Facebook lead, that they receive an email right away saying, welcome, here's some more information about the organization, and reference how they came in. So if you were mentioning the impact report as a download, making sure that they receive that download right away, even through the email or through the lead gen ad itself. So that way they're looking at the relevant information that got them interested in the first place. So focusing that first email on that and then deciding, like, do you want to have an extra 2 emails or just one? Some series are 2 part long and some are 3, depending on the organization, what has worked well for them. Some do testing and they only do 2 welcome emails. And so like the second one would be focused more on like, here's other ways you can help support us. You can volunteer or make a donation. So we try to lead into the donation as soon as possible. In the past, when we've extended the welcome series for prospects, we saw that a lot of them fell off after the 3rd email. And so we always want to make sure that the second follow-up a week or 2 later references ways that can support the organization. And then one of the best ways that we've found is pushing monthly giving in the welcome series.
Yeah, and sometimes it may require multiple touch points across different channels or different platforms before someone who provided their lead information is ready or willing to make a donation. And so by really thinking about the way that we can use knowledge from how people behave when they receive those emails and the actions they take can also help inform remarketing opportunities via ads. For example, to put or to serve an ad to someone who received the welcome series and potentially clicked on several emails and went to a donation page, but didn't make a donation. That prospect could, again, potentially be ready to make a donation when provided with different touch points, including ads that could be served when they're searching or when they're watching videos on YouTube or when they are surfing through social media channels.
Great. So we have a couple more questions coming in. So this is scheduled to go to quarter after, so we definitely have time for them. So we're happy to take them. Let me ask, what should we prioritize if we're an organization that has small capacity? What should we prioritize as the lowest hanging fruit to improve our digital program?
That's a great question. And to that is going back to the welcome series. That's the first step in the process of really streamlining your communication. So once you are, continually growing your file, you want to make sure that you have these communications in place. And so it's a really basic thing of just having at least, 2 to 3 emails, welcoming people into the fold, and then continuing on with your communication touch points and trying converting those leads. So I think that would be the first step. And of course, as your program matures, you can look into other strategies in terms of re-engaging supporters. If you don't have the ad budget capacity, of course, to do it with ads, but at least via email, you can keep touching base with your supporters.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's where also limited capacity and potentially also with limited budgets, looking at the things that you can do with low cost. So establishing a presence across like all of the relevant social media channels, starting with the ones that offer the largest reach, and then taking advantage of things like the Google grant. If Google's willing to provide 10,000 in free ads per month, so that you can have a presence on the largest search engine in the world. Again, those are things that can help you boost awareness and get your name out there, generate site visitation, again with limited capacity.
Thank you, Vijay. The next question is that if do you have some suggestions for great online payment options that would be widely available and not limited to the United States or Europe?
I'll let Vijay answer this one since it's more of in his wheelhouse. So.
Of course. So, I mean, just in terms of, I'll speak a little bit to what is established. So things like PayPal are large payment processors that are established. In terms of others that offer like that global reach, I think it's interesting to start to look at what's new and what's starting to come down the pike. So all of the OEMs that create our mobile phones are all vying for different payment solutions, and those payment solutions are going to increase in terms of where they're available and how much they are going to be adopted. So something like an Apple Pay could be again relevant there. But I think to the extent that you can empower choice, especially among like digital natives who will be donating with greater frequency and will comprise a greater portion of just overall fundraising activity in the future, would be a smart thing to begin to plan for.
And let me just add that also with the payment systems, remember that if tax deductibility is important to you for those different markets, then it's important that you have a partner in those markets that can help you with that, like the King Baudouin Foundation or like another fiscal sponsor, because certainly you can accept payments from anywhere, but that doesn't mean that it would be tax deductible for those donors in those countries. So we have 2 more questions. I'll take the next one. Do you have any examples of key performance indicators to measure the progress in relationship building with your target groups? And I think we mean the progress towards making a gift.
On the email side, we really look at the open rate and click-through rate. Well, given with new advances and updates with iOS, this is going to change dramatically, where we have to really look at more of the click-through rate in the email to really determine how the donor is communicating through to the donation page. So we look at that metric as the most important right now on the email side. I know ads, there's more involved, so I'll let Vijay talk to those briefly. But we really look at that. So if we see that a percentage of people are clicking through, and then we see also if they made a donation or not. And so we compared it to, it's like, look at the response rate, look at the click-through rate through the email and see like, where did people, jump off before making the donation, those who didn't. And so we kind of try to make sure that we do enough testing on the donation page to prevent too much friction when they go on that landing page from the email. So those are the main things that we look at on the email side. So I'll let Vijay talk to the ads.
Yeah, I think specifically, we could examine metrics around the donation page visitation, not only how many people are visiting, but are they immediately leaving? Are they spending time on it? Are they advancing if it's a multi-step form to the last step? All of those things are indicators on how close we are in terms of getting people to donate. But taking a step back, people donate when they're aware of your organization, and there are ways that we can actually measure that. So that's measurable in terms of how many people directly type your website into a browser URL. How many people search for your nonprofit organization? How often is your nonprofit organization mentioned in social? All of those things can be measured and benchmarked and measured over time. And there is a causal relationship in terms of that level of awareness, how many people know about you and who you are and how often they're searching for you and talking about you on social media, and how much fundraising revenue you generate.
Thank you, Vijay. It's another very interesting question, I would say. Can anyone access Google grants, and how, including groups outside of the United States, how is it possible? And what was the biggest amount that you have been able to utilize from the monthly Google grants?
Yep, I'm happy to jump in here. Google does make grants available for 501c3 organizations that are both within the US and outside of the US. There are, I mentioned, some eligibility requirements. For example, an eligibility requirement is having the EIN number for your nonprofit present in the footer of your website. There are other eligibility requirements as well, but the standard grant amount is $10,000 per month. It does not vary and it does not carry over. In the past, there was a program that is now has been sunset. It was called Grants Pro, and nonprofits that were part of the Grants Pro program were actually allowed to spend up to $40,000 per month, and they've been grandfathered. So there are a number of nonprofits that continue to be able to spend that much, and we have seen instances where Google's generosity has resulted in a standard grant, a 10K grant, being provided with additional funds due to something like COVID-19. So last year, several of our grants received boosts that were really unpredictable for us. We did not expect them, nor could we predict them, but Google contacted us and said, on behalf of these nonprofit organizations, we're going to extend the grant amount by, and some of them had the grants extended by up to $40,000. So that's a little bit about the Google Grant Program.
Vijay, you mentioned the eligibility, including that they're 501c3s and EIN. So foreign organization isn't going to have an EIN, which, by the way, everybody, is just the tax ID for U.S. organizations. So I'm a little confused. Is it available if you do not have a 501c3 or an EIN?
No, so apologies. It will be a requirement, so you will have to have that that base, correct?
Okay. Or you can have a fiscal sponsor, I'd imagine, as you can with other types of grants. So I'll just put that out there. Now, let me first thank our speakers. Thank you so much, Carla and Vijay, for joining us today. I think the session was incredibly informative and eye-opening, certainly for myself and certainly for all the participants. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jana from the Czech Fundraising Center. Thank you so much for your partnership and for your invaluable help for this session. Everybody, the recording will be made available, so no need to email us for that. We will gladly circulate that. And just a final word to say thank you from the King Baudouin Foundation, United States. Please do reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to help. And please allow me to turn it over to Jana for the final word.
Okay, Elena, thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to cooperate with you and open new topics and interesting questions to the auditorium in the Central and Eastern Europe, but not only. And thank you, Lindsay and Emily, for, again, a perfect preparation of everything we needed for organizing that. And for sure, thank you, Vijay and Carla, for a very insightful presentation. And as I read in the chat or Q&A, and everybody's looking forward to see it again in the recording and go deeper in what you have mentioned. And last but not least, thank you all attendees that you join us, and I hope we will see you again in another opportunity, possibly not only digital, but it looks like that this is the only way how we can meet in such a number of people in these times. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of the day or evening. It depends on where you are, and see you next time.
Bye, everyone.